When did Ezra Klein speak positively about the boy? I didn't see that. I did see him hit the Zohran is actually very good. And I was like, nice. Okay. Eventually, you're going to land on a good take. You know what I mean? This was this thing that I saw online where he's like, I've met Zohran Mamdani. I voted for Zohran Mamdani. I don't think there's anything anti-Semitic about him at all, says Ezra Klein. The reason why I was even talking about that is because like there is this, major fissure happening on the right with Nick Fuentes. And of course, Ezra Klein has talked about it as well. And he's talked about like the dangers of anti-Semitism on the right and how anti-Semitism is even being weaponized against those on the left who are not anti-Semitic at all. And this Fox News clown ass was apparently very pissed off about that because Ezra Klein seemingly mentioned me in a positive way. He considers that to be unacceptable because he's trying to make this idiotic argument that, as a matter of fact, the liberals on the internet also try to make, which is that I am just as dangerous a figure, just as vile a figure as Nick Fuentes. And he even went so far as to say I have like a vile ideology. He said it was Pikerism, as though it's like a real fully fleshed out ideology. And to which I said, to be attacked by the enemy is not a bad thing, but a good thing, right? It's okay. It's okay that they say there is a distinction between someone like myself and someone like this dipshit, right? I'm fine with that. I'm happy with that. It forces these guys to basically explain exactly what they mean. Lean in, explain it. What do you mean by this? What is the major difference between someone like myself and someone like Nick Fuentes? Because there are very significant differences. When you start trying to explain those things, when you start with the process of explanation, you will inevitably arrive at what this person's worldview actually looks like. And at that point, you can basically figure out for yourself whether this is a good person or a bad person.
Is worrisome to me. I'm not sure if the right is going to ultimately be successful in marginalizing people who need to be, in my view, when the left is taking their own equivalents on that extreme, on that radical side, and not just indulging them, but increasingly embracing them. Right? Hasan Piker was a valued, honored guest at the Pod Bros Summit they just had, the Obama guys with their podcast. He was there. Yeah, come on, get on stage. We love you. He's had glowing pieces in GQ and the New York Times, and I think Variety. He's this handsome young guy. Maybe he's the next big thing on the left. Almost always whitewashing the appalling things that this guy says and believes. You'd never see that kind of coverage for the Groypers, and you shouldn't.
Is it whitewashing the things that I'm saying? Or is it not negatively framing it in the way that you would? Because you are right-wing. Because there is a distinction here. There is a difference here. There is a difference ultimately with the maximalist position of communism versus the maximalist position of fascism. Okay? And while I do not call myself a communist, I have no issue with the term and I have no issue with the designation whatsoever. Okay? I don't. And that's the reason why these guys get so freaked out by it, where they'll be like, oh, he has even said he thinks communism is an honorable end goal. It's like, okay, explain it. Explain it. Why do you not think it is? We're not talking about whether it is achievable or not. We are talking about whether it is good or not, because a utopian vision, a utopian version of fascism implies that there is like some kind of genetic, ethnic, sectarian purity. The utopian version, the utopian end goal, the goal to strive towards under communism is a statesless, classless, moneyless society, a borderless society. I don't understand how you can look at these two things and be like, well, one is dangerous and scary. The other one is also dangerous and scary. It doesn't make any sense. That's why there are differences between Charlie Kirk and Nick Fuentes' worldview, but the differences are marginal. I would go so far as to say the difference in Charlie Kirk and Nick Fuentes' worldview is more marginal than the difference between myself and Ezra Klein's worldview. Because at the end of the day, Ezra Klein is still pro-capitalist. He's a liberal capitalist. He believes in capitalism. He thinks capitalism is good. You see what I mean? There is a bigger division between someone like myself and Ezra Klein than there is between Charlie Kirk, that guy Guy Benson, and Nick Fuentes. And that's precisely the reason why those guys, while they think, you know, Nick Fuentes is maybe dangerous and scary, will do everything they can to unironically defend the likes of Nick Fuentes at the end of the day. The difference is cosmetic at best. Yeah, like they both want mass deportation, for example. But I think that the real whiplash right now, or the real backlash, is coming from this. This Twitter post did LeBron numbers. And I don't mean LeBron numbers in the way that LeBron James is doing LeBron numbers on Twitter, which is not great. I love watching YouTube golf videos, random I know law, so cool, which, you know, LeBron was ratioed by friend of the show, Maya Higa. But the post in and of itself is doing LeBron numbers all over the timeline. And one thing I have noticed is that for the first time ever, a major news publication actually presented my quotes and actually presented my worldview. Okay? That's it. Normally, when the New York Times does a profile, or when all these other outlets do a profile on me, they talk about how hot I am. And while I don't necessarily mind that, okay, they rarely ever get into what my worldview looks like, what my beliefs are. It turns out when you actually do get into what my worldview is or what my beliefs are, and people encounter it for the first time ever and hear me in my own words, rather than filtered through a million different negative associations, rather than filtered in the most negative ways possible, it turns out people actually vibe with it quite a bit. Don't say, all right, buddy, this is serious. A week after appearing at the center of much media attention at Mamdani's victory party, Hasan Piker gets an unchallenged and promoted write-up in Variety, writing off Israel as an ethno-fascist state and saying Gal Gadot is a part of the sexualization ploy by the Israeli army. Will Miniger, I like Hasan too, but surely this kind of fawning tone and promotion doesn't befit a reporter of your stature. It's because you've had the right predictions and takes for years. It finally makes sense to certain audiences. Yes. People, I think, needed to see either more political defeats. Liberals, I think, needed to actually experience even more political defeats for them to basically realize, like, oh shit, maybe we were lied to by a lot of centrist Democrats about how centrism is actually the method. Centrism is actually the movement. Centrism is actually the pathway to electability to defeat the Republicans. Terrifying how overnight it has become increasingly acceptable to demonize someone simply because they're from Israel. Yes, a digital pogrom, says Laura Loomer. Words have no meaning anymore. A digital pogrom. What's the difference between Hasan Piker and Nick Fuentes? Just read the quote in Fuentes' voice. It's the same hateful anti-Zionist rage. What Elon Levy doesn't understand is, I mean, he doesn't understand much, but what he doesn't understand in this situation is presenting Nick Fuentes as an anti-Zionist in an article where I actually say Nick Fuentes is like an insane anti-Semite, okay, and masks his anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism, is that this actually doesn't hurt me, dumbass. This actually promotes Nick Fuentes. And these guys do not get it, okay? The pro-Israel people do not get it. Some of them do, and they don't care about growing anti-Semitism in the Western world because they think it suits the purpose of the Zionist project in general, right? If Jews are fearful of living in the West, maybe then they'll move to Israel, right? But many others unironically don't realize that they are making a country that they choose to live in a scarier place for them. They're making the country that they want to live in, they're making the country that they love, the United States of America, a scarier place to live in for Jews. Okay? That's it. Because they are unable to recognize that a defense of Israel, a robust defense of Israel, does not work any longer. And associating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism is actually making people feel as though they might be more anti-Semitic than they actually previously thought they were, rather than making people question whether they should be anti-Zionist or not, or anti-Israel or not. It makes them go, okay, I guess I'm anti-Semitic then. Why does Israel have this much institutional power then? Like, those are the questions that people are asking themselves. And many of these guys are completely unable to see. They are completely unable to see that reality. And it's something that I have warned about for the last 2 years. It's a thing that I have seen from afar. Why are you anti-Israel but not anti-China? What do you mean? What do you mean? There is no comparison. There's no equivalence between the two. There's none. And you can go and look at my previous YouTube videos to understand why there is no equivalence. Is a thing that I've mentioned quite a bit. They're talking about the Cultural Revolution? Okay, sure. Anyway, as an ex-groiper, literally, yes, this is how I thought. If being anti-Israel makes me an anti-Semite, then I'm an anti-Semite. All the levers of power are telling me I'm wrong, so they all must be controlled by Jews. Yeah. No, that's it. That's it. That's like, these guys actually, pro-Israel people, unironically, make the same arguments to the onlookers that groipers are making, that Nazis are making about Jewish control over American media, Jewish control over American politics. They are literally living that argument in the way that they operate. That's it. When you have all of these different politicians who are like, oh yeah, woke is dead, we're anti-woke, turn into the biggest DEI defenders when it comes to Jewish people, specifically to defend the state of Israel, obviously. What the f*** are Americans supposed to assume here? What the f*** are right-wingers supposed to assume here? They're going to look at that and be like, the f***? I thought, it was no holds barred. I'm a homegrown, corn-fed country boy from Arkansas, and you mean to tell me that I can shit on Mexicans, black people, Muslims all day, every day, but then, I make jokes about Jews, and all of a sudden I'm public enemy number one? Okay, well then, maybe there is something to the narratives. Maybe there is something to the arguments. Like, that's what normal people experience. The last point I wanted to make is Ezra Klein actually, I don't know if he covered me favorably here, with the exception of the first 20 seconds where I'm talking about Nick Fuentes and shit. But yeah, Ezra Klein talked about Zohran Mamdani not being an anti-Semitic person.
Or just being a normal person. You had not heard of Nick Fuentes until this month. Chances are you've heard of him now.
Nick Fuentes is odious and despicable.
He's what I would call a racist. He's just this troll.
Nick Fuentes has said a long list of very vile things.
Big time. He's a booger-eating, white supremacist Holocaust denier.
The reason everybody's talking about Fuentes is Tucker Carlson, who is arguably at this point the most significant media figure on the American right, hosted Fuentes, a person he has feuded with in the past, for a very friendly 2-hour chat.
I wanted to meet you. I've heard about you.
I've heard about you.
About the problem of Israel, about the problem of American Jews and whether or not they fit in this country or their loyalties are elsewhere.
If you're China first, you should live in China. If you're Mexico first, you should live in Mexico. If you're Israel first, maybe you should go live in Israel.
It was the kind of conversation you would not have heard among mainstream figures on the American right.
See, something you need to understand there is that Nick Fuentes is a very dangerous propagandist and a very good propagandist for that reason. Because while he hates Jews, he's anti-Semitic, what he is saying there, one, makes total sense to the average person, and two, what he's saying there is not even anti-Semitic, okay? And he's also utilizing right-wing sentiment to make this point. Tucker Carlson does an even better job than Nick Fuentes on this issue, because Tucker Carlson does not actually say the quiet part out loud ever. Like, he has way more messaging discipline than Nick Fuentes, and that's partially because he has way more media training than Nick Fuentes, right? He is a professional media demon. That's his background. He's been doing this for almost as long as Nick Fuentes has been alive at this point. So of course he's going to be better at that. That's why I think he's like very dangerous in general, very scary in general. But like, that's why, for example, people were like, oh, how dare you? Like, people tried to say that I was being anti-Semitic to Ben Shapiro for saying, for clipping my, I don't have any patriotism in my heart for any country, really. When he clipped it and was like complaining about it, I said, I don't have any patriotism for any country. I don't really understand patriotism. You, on the other hand, are first and foremost patriotic to Israel. And what was, interesting about that is, like, people were like, oh, you're doing dual loyalty tropes. It's like, no, dumbass. When you say that's a dual loyalty trope, you sound ridiculous. And the reason why you sound ridiculous is because there's a difference between assuming any Jew is going to be loyal to Israel versus Ben Shapiro, who objectively communicates that he is invested in Israel first and foremost above pretty much anything else. Okay? That's it. Point to a single moment where Ben Shapiro has ever deviated from the pro-Israel position. Oftentimes, even when it's against not just the American government's interest, but when it's against the interest of the American citizenry. Okay? Everything that I advocate for, people try to say, is actually negative to the Americans. But that is not the case. Okay? If I hated America, I'm a relatively wealthy person. I can live pretty much anywhere I wanted to live. If I hated America that much, I'd just off and leave. Okay? I'd be like, all right, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. This shit. The reason why I stay in America, and the reason why I live in America, and the reason why I'm constantly complaining about America is because I want America to be better for Americans, okay? For everyone that lives inside of the boundaries of the U.S. state. That's it. And these guys will forever hate me for it. When I say, God damn it, America is like so violent as a country, okay? When I say that, when I say like, oh God, it's like, it's impossible to love America right now, I'm talking about America not meeting its promise. Okay? Yeah, and I said, I'm not a patriotic person in general. You are patriotic for Israel first and foremost. Which is true. And the same thing happened with Miriam Adelson. People were like, Miriam Adelson is an Israeli citizen and patriotic to Israel. Okay? Miriam Adelson cares more about what happens in Israel or America's continued allegiance to Israel than she does about Americans in general. Now, of course, Miriam Adelson doesn't care about Americans in general because she is a... Oh, this button is off. Thank you for calling it out, chatter. The reason why she doesn't care about Americans in general is because she's a billionaire, first and foremost. If you're a billionaire, you don't care about the working class in general. That's your class position. That's all you that's all you ever openly state. But then outside of that, the reason why it's not dual loyalty when you point to Miriam Adelson being exceptionally pro-Israel is because she is exceptionally pro-Israel. Like, what are we doing? We can't just say the truth. There is a difference between the racialized sentiment that leans into complete reactionary tropes that are made up about black people, about brown people, and then constantly going along with that kind of narrative. And then when people say like, oh, dude, what the f*** are you saying? That's racist. You go, oh, what? I can't say the truth. Versus unironically talking about a person who openly is saying that they're pro-Israel. And if you can't actually communicate these things that most people can see with their eyes and hear with their ears and analyze with their brains, even the dumbest person on the planet can see that, like, you are not going to be able to successfully, you are not going to be able to have build a successful political movement in general. Anyway, here was the point that I wanted to show you with Zohran Mamdani and Ezra Klein. I'm glad that he is like coming on to this, coming to this side.
Why should we be talking about what this, Rumble influencer thinks about the Jews when the left is electing Zohran Mamdani, right? When there's been these years of debate about anti-Semitism on the left. I'll say this super clearly. I've met Zohran Mamdani voted for Zohran Mamdani. I don't think there's anything anti-Semitic about him at all. But I think you see in the way he has been treated, and then also what is happening on the right, a distinction that is worth understanding, a structural distinction. That anti-Zionism on the left often pushes towards what I would call liberalism, a belief that all people should have equal rights, that there should be universalism. There's a different version of it if you're more sort of socialist and Marxist.
Right.
But the left tends to push towards a universalism. And
Yes.
a lot of the anger
Yes.
at Israel.
Yes, even though Ezra Klein and I see the world in dramatically different ways, this is why I always say he's smart enough to, one, read the room, and two, he's smart enough to make this honest assessment, this honest analysis. Many liberals refuse to do this, okay, which is part of the reason why I actually appreciate Ezra Klein at times, even though I disagree with him vehemently in other instances, okay? That's it. That's true. It's true. If liberalism is about equality, which is supposed to be like the foundational tenets of liberalism, then yes, leftists and liberals are aligned on those principles, or they are at least supposed to be aligned on those principles. Liberals, of course, do not see the equality destroying aspects of capitalism, and they safeguard it, and they basically blind themselves to the ways that this economic organization of the economy prioritizes profit over the interests of people, right? But ultimately, in theory, that's what liberals care about. That's what liberalism is supposed to represent.
This, I think much of it merited, is the way it betrays universalism for the Palestinians living under its control.
Sure.
On the right, it's pushing towards ethno-state politics.
Right.
That the
Yes.
fundamental argument and a way in which modern Israel's tried to create new coalitions is to say, hey, we're all ethno-states here.
Right.
But once you buy into the ethno-state frame, then the fact that you see Jews as an ethnic other
Right.
in your society pushes somewhere very different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pushes towards ideas of expulsion, pushes towards ideas that they're a fifth column within, that they are leading your country to betray its actual interests in order to, that they have dual loyalties.
Right.
But there is this weird thing where there's been a rise of like Jewish figures or Jewish aligned figures who want to embrace ethno-state politics.
Sure.
I mean, you have like Yoram Hazony, Jewish, lives in Jerusalem, the founder of NatCon, going to the NatCon conference, which he started, and saying, look, you have to like the Jews to be a national conservative.
Thank you. Oh my God. I mean, this is like the most extreme version of it, the most out there version of it, the most honest version of it, right? And it's one that Israel openly writes for, which is why like people like Ezra have to be like, this is, as a liberal, as a card-carrying liberal, this doesn't abide by the universalist principles I believe in. But it extends beyond these guys. It extends beyond these figures. It's not simply coalition building for Benjamin Netanyahu. There is not a lot of daylight between Benjamin Netanyahu and Itamar Ben-Gvir. Maybe there are domestic differences, right, within this coalition, like domestic policy differences when it comes to like social issues and whatnot. But ultimately, when it comes to the ethno-religious superiority and the ethnic cleansing, Israeli society is not so divided, right? Zionists are not divided on these things because they have a firm commitment to advancing the Greater Israel Project. They have a firm commitment to basically destroying all Palestinians because they see that as a hurdle against advancing the Greater Israel Project. It's not that there isn't a lot of distinction between even liberal Zionists and the ultra-Zionists out there, right? And a lot of people refuse to recognize that. Ezra Klein would disagree with me. He himself is a liberal Zionist, so he will most likely disagree with me. I would be very interested in having this discussion with him because I think he is an honest actor in general, or at least like presents himself as such when he's having these sorts of interesting conversations. That's why I always say, like, I think it'd be a unique conversation. He's done it with Ta-Nehisi Coates, right? Twice now. The reason why I say that is because, like, while he's still saying, like, oh, there's, like, really right-wing attitudes in Israel, and it's a part of the coalition that they've created. It's just like one of the dangers of one of the unfortunate consequences of like trying to operate within this democratic system, right? Is that you're going to have these sorts of far right figures in your coalition at times in order to maintain power. But the reality of the matter is that liberal coalition on the opposing side of Benjamin Netanyahu also agrees with Benjamin Netanyahu when it comes to Gaza. The Liberal Coalition also agrees with Benjamin Netanyahu when it comes to attacking international organs of justice. Attacking international organs of justice when they actually call out Israel for potentially doing war crimes. So there is not a lot of difference in opinion when it comes to the issues that matter. Just as there's not a lot of difference in opinion when it comes to the issues that matter within the Republican Party and the Democratic Party when it comes to healthcare being a privatized endeavor. It has to be for profit. It is uniparty. Do you understand?
But there's nobody ever said, and I this is for my Jewish friends, nobody ever said that to be a good NatCon, you had to love Israel. Nobody ever said that to be a good NatCon, you had to love Jews.
And so the one point of anger I have at a lot of people on the right who I think have been playing footsie with this for a long time is that once you embrace the ethno-state concept, this is where that leads.
Yes.
Well,
yes. I'm glad he's like saying this. Okay. I'm glad he's saying this on New York Times. I cannot imagine. I cannot see a world where one of the most prestigious, not from our perspective, just in general, right? One of the most prestigious commentary people at the most prestigious newspaper in the United States of America would openly, as a Jewish American too, say, of course, if you lean into Israel as an ethno-state project, then that opens up the floodgates of ethno-nationalism of different sorts, including the incredibly scary version of it that we have seen, right? This is something that I have said for years, right? I say I hate Nick Fuentes for the same reasons why I hate Itamar Ben-Gvir, because they are the same. I hate fascism. All the same. It doesn't matter if it's the Aryan fascism of the Nazis or the Jewish fascism of Israel. It's fascism nonetheless. And if you are an anti-fascist, if you're a principled anti-fascist, if you abhor racism, if you abhor ethno-nationalist politics, then of course you are going to have the same level of smoke for both of these things. And it is the Zionist wing of American politics that has played a formative role in the anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish wing of American politics growing. Are you paying them $20K to use your lines now? Yes. Exactly. I paid Ezra Klein, so he says these things.